4 months ago, I was living in a $4.2 million house in California with my wife and my kids. Today, I'm holding a letter that shows my whole life has been a lie, and the woman who completely ruined me might have saved my life without ever knowing it. My name is Ethan Wells, and I am 49 years old. Until recently, I worked as an insurance adjuster in Sunview, California. The kind of guy who spent his days checking other people's problems and helping them fix things. I had what everyone would call the American dream. A beautiful wife named Serena, who I had been married to for 18 years. 2 kids, Aiden and Lily, aged 17 and 15. Both very smart and the absolute most important people in my world. We lived in this beautiful house high up in the hills with a great view of the whole city spread out below us like a huge, shiny blanket. I was sure I knew exactly who I was. Ethan Wells, the son of Martha Wells, a quiet librarian who raised me alone after my father died in a car accident when I was only 12. My father was supposedly just a normal guy. He worked in construction, died too young, and left my mom to figure out how to raise a son on a librarian's low pay. We didn't have much money growing up in Indiana, but mom always made sure that I had whatever I needed. She was the kind of caring woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who kept all the photo albums organized by year, who made sure I ate all my vegetables and always did my schoolwork. Serena was my high school sweetheart. We met when I was 17, and she was 16. We fell in love with everything we had. She was focused, pretty, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and get attention right away. She started selling real estate right after college and was very good at it. We built this whole life together, step by step, year after year. Our children arrived. We moved to California for better job chances, bought the dream house, and signed up Aiden and Lily in private schools. Aiden was our star athlete, built like his grandfather supposedly was, though I never really knew my father well enough to know. He played varsity basketball, and colleges were already watching him. Lily was the family artist, much like my mother had been in her quiet way. She could draw anything, having this special way of seeing the world that made you stop and truly look at things. For 49 years, this was my whole story. This was exactly who I was. Ethan Wells, family man, insurance adjuster, former Indiana kid who found success in California. I had no reason to question any part of it. Then, everything started to fall apart completely. It started about 18 months ago with many small things. Serena would get phone calls and immediately step outside to take them privately. She would come home from work later and later, claiming new clients. She began looking at me in a strange, different way, like I was a stranger she was trying to figure out. The real warmth we had shared for almost 2 decades just started cooling down until I felt exactly like I was living with a person who barely liked my being there. The kids noticed it too. Aiden would often ask me why mom seemed angry all the time. Lily started spending much more time alone in her room, drawing darker pictures, sketches of families that looked broken even when they were smiling. I kept thinking it was just the face, maybe work stress. I seriously tried talking with Serena, tried planning date nights, tried absolutely everything I could think of to connect again with the woman I had loved since I was a teenager. Nothing I did ever worked. My efforts seemed only to make her more distant and more openly angry toward me. Then, the divorce papers finally arrived. Not just normal divorce papers, but a complete attack on every single thing I thought I knew about my own life. According to Serena's lawyer, Vivian Hall, I was a desperate gambling addict who had been hiding huge personal debt. I was claimed to be bad with money, possibly dangerous, and certainly not fit to have custody of our children. They showed bank statements proving transactions I had never made, casino receipts with my signature that I had never signed, witness statements claiming I had borrowed money and never paid them back. Not one word of any of it was true, but somehow they had official papers for every single claim. The courtroom became a real nightmare. I sat there helplessly, watching my entire life get pulled apart by lawyers who talked about me as if I were some kind of criminal. My own wife, the mother of my children, the woman I had shared a bed with for 18 years, refused even to look at me. When the judge legally gave Serena everything, the house, main control of the children, even my business money, I felt something important break deep inside my chest. But the worst moment happened afterward, outside the courthouse. Serena walked directly up to me with a look I had never seen before, cold and satisfied. She leaned in very close and softly whispered, "Aiden and Lily will never see you again. I am moving them to Portland next month, and you no longer have the money to fight me." That's when I finally knew this was not simply a marriage problem. This was something else entirely, something deeply planned and incredibly mean that I could not possibly understand. Within just 6 weeks, I had completely lost my house, my children, and even my job license because of the fake claims of money problems. I had nowhere else left to go except back to Indiana to my mother's small house that had been sitting empty since she passed away 2 years ago. So I loaded what little was left of my life into the back of my Honda Civic and slowly drove 1,200 miles back to a place I had not lived in since I was 18 years old. That is exactly where this entire story truly begins. The long drive from California to Indiana took me 3 exhausting days, and every mile I traveled felt exactly like I was moving backward through my own life. By the time I finally pulled into the driveway of my mother's house on Oak Lane in Canton, I felt like a sad ghost returning to haunt his own past life. The house looked exactly the same as it had during Mom's funeral 2 years ago. Small, neat, the kind of 1,960 seconds house that showed the American middle class. I sat motionless in the car for a long time before I could bring myself to step inside. This was supposed to be temporary, just a place to get myself together while I planned how to reclaim my life. But sitting there, looking at that simple house, I could not help but think about how far I had fallen. 4 months ago, I could clearly see downtown Los Angeles from my bedroom window. Now, I was staring at Mrs. Patterson's garden statues across the street. My mother, Martha Wells, had lived in this house for 35 years. She bought it when I was 12, right after my father passed away, using his life insurance money and the little bit they had managed to save. It was the type of purchase that represented hope more than logic. A single mother on a librarian's salary, taking on a mortgage because she believed her son deserved a backyard and his very own room. Mom was the most quietly strong person I had ever known. She never remarried after Dad died. She gave herself fully to raising me and her work at the downtown branch of the Canton Public Library. She had this wonderful way of making our small life feel rich and completely full. We never had enough money for big vacations, so she would invent adventures in our own backyard. We would put up the camping tent and sleep outside under the stars. What I recall most clearly about my mother was her apparent quiet certainty about absolutely everything. She always knew precisely how much money we had, exactly when the bills needed to be paid, exactly what I was going to need, even before I knew I needed it myself. For a woman who had become a widow at a young age and was left to raise a child alone, she never seemed worried or overwhelmed. She simply handled whatever needed handling with this calm capability that made me feel safe. The odd thing was that we always seemed to have just enough money. Never a lot, but never the kind of desperate lack you would naturally expect from a single mother on a librarian's salary. When I needed new clothes, there was money for clothes. When the car broke down, she had the money to fix it. When I wanted to attend college, she somehow made that possible too, though she never fully explained how she had saved that much. I asked her about it one time when I was in my 22nd, newly married to Serena, and starting to understand just how expensive life could be. Mom, how did you do it? How did you succeed in giving me everything I ever needed on the salary the library paid you? She simply offered that quiet smile of hers and said, "You find the successful way when someone you truly love depends on you. That is simply what all good parents do." Now, unlocking the front door and stepping inside her house for the first time since the funeral, I could smell her familiar presence everywhere. The furniture was positioned exactly where she had left it. Her reading glasses still rested on the end table beside her preferred chair. The last book she had been reading lay open on the coffee table. Walking through those familiar rooms, I felt the heavy weight of absolutely everything I had lost pressing down on me. My children were 1,000 miles away, probably being told lies about their father. My wife had transformed into a complete stranger who seemed to hate me. My job was completely destroyed, my good name was in ruins, and my bank account was empty. But standing there in my mother's living room, surrounded by her books and her photographs, and the quiet dignity of the life she has successfully built for us, I made a decision. This house was the one single thing Serena's lawyers could not legally take away from me. It was mine now, free and entirely clear of debt. I decided I would fix it up, sell it quickly, and use every single penny to fight back hard for my children. It seemed like a sensible and good plan. I had no idea that I was about to find out that my mother had left me something far more valuable than just real estate. The formal divorce process started 8 months after Serena first asked for space. I should have clearly seen what was coming, but I was still foolishly believing we could work things out. I will never forget the morning the papers were legally served. The doorbell rang sharply at 7:30 inches the morning, and standing there was a process server holding an envelope that would completely destroy everything I thought I knew about my existence. The petition was not just requesting a divorce, it was demanding absolutely everything. But the thing that truly made my blood run cold were the serious claims. According to these shocking documents, I was a compulsive gambler who had been hiding huge debts. They falsely claimed I had stolen client money to support my addiction. They painted a picture of me as bad with money and potentially dangerous to my own children. None of these claims were true. I had perhaps purchased 5 total lottery tickets in my entire life, never once set foot inside a casino, and never even played poker with friends. But somehow, Serena's attorney, Vivian Hall, had definitive papers for every single claim. When I angrily confronted her that same evening, she was mechanically packing boxes in our bedroom. "Serena, what the hell is the meaning of this?" I held up the divorce papers, my hands noticeably shaking. "Gambling addiction, theft. You know for a fact none of this is true." She did not even bother to look up. "I know what the facts are, Ethan," she said. "The bank statements simply do not lie." "What bank statements?" "Show me these supposed bank statements." That's when she finally stopped and turned to face me. And I saw something in her eyes that I had never witnessed before. Something terrifyingly cold and highly calculated that made her look like a complete stranger. "You are simply not the man I married years ago," she stated quietly. "Perhaps you never truly were that man." The next 6 weeks were a complete blur of legal meetings, document reviews, and watching my entire life get pulled apart by strangers. Serena's lawyer, Vivian Hall, presented strong evidence that should have been impossible to fake. My own lawyer, a decent gentleman named Mark Chen, kept shaking his head in disbelief as we reviewed everything. "Ethan, I have to directly ask you, is any part of this real?" "Mark, I completely swear on my children's lives, I have never gambled anything. Someone is actively setting me up, and I do not understand how or why." But the false evidence kept coming. The worst element was observing my children during this entire ordeal. Aiden started actively avoiding me. Lily would still give me a hug, good night, but I could clearly see the deep confusion in her eyes. The mandatory custody evaluation was deeply humiliating. The court-appointed psychologist, Dr. Alvarez, asked me questions about my mental well-being and my habits. She was professional but very distant. "Mr. Wells, addiction often involves a great deal of denial. Many gambling addicts become very skilled at successfully hiding their destructive behavior." "Doctor, I understand that, but I am not an addict. I am sincerely telling you the genuine truth." The final court hearing was scheduled for Tuesday in November. I drove to the courthouse that morning fully knowing I was likely going to lose my children. Judge Eleanor White awarded Serena primary custody, the house, and the majority of our money. I was granted only supervised visitation. As we slowly walked out of the courthouse, Serena quickly caught up to me in the parking lot. She was smiling broadly, actually smiling, as she delivered the final devastating blow. "Aiden and Lily will never see you again. I'm relocating them to Portland next month, and you no longer possess the money to fight me." That night, I sat alone in my empty apartment and tried desperately to figure out exactly how my entire life had become completely unrecognizable in less than 1 year. Living in my mother's small house was exactly like stepping into an old time capsule. Everything remained precisely as she had left it when she passed away 2 years ago. The first few weeks, I barely moved from the living room couch. I would wake up every morning thinking perhaps this was all some terrible nightmare. But every morning, I would clearly see the water stain on Mom's ceiling and be reminded that my old life was completely gone. I felt very, very sad for about a month. Then, something deep inside me finally snapped. I suddenly realized that if I was going to have even the slightest chance of getting my children back, I desperately needed money. And the only true asset I had remaining was this house. The house needed extensive work. If I was going to successfully sell it for enough money to fund a long, expensive legal battle, I had to make it look truly perfect. I threw myself into the renovation tasks with a desperate, frantic energy. I ripped off old wallpaper, sanded the floors until they shone, and painted every single room. Working hard with my own hands felt genuinely good after months of only sitting uselessly in lawyers' offices feeling completely helpless. The basement was the very last area I decided to tackle. Going through her personal things was emotional, but also strangely comforting. That's when I finally noticed something very strange near the main furnace area. The concrete floor surface all around it looked very different from the rest of the basement. There were distinct scratch marks that appeared relatively new. It looked strongly like the heavy furnace had been successfully moved, and recently too. That seemed impossible. The furnace had to weigh several hundred pounds easily. I spent the better part of a long afternoon figuring out the difficult logistics of how to move that thing. My back was screaming in pain by the time I finally managed it, but the effort was worth it. Behind the furnace, set deep into the concrete wall at about shoulder height, was a small safe I had never once known existed. It was one of those old-style combination safes, painted the same dull gray as the basement wall. The metal surface was worn smooth in certain places, like it had been successfully opened many times over many years. I stared at that unexpected safe for probably 20 minutes straight, my mind working furiously. The combination lock had numbers clearly ranging from 0 to 99. But as I stood there nervously looking at it, something my mother used to do came back into my mind. Every single year on my birthday, March 15th, she would call me exactly at 7:23 inches in the morning. She had always said it was because that was the precise moment I was born. March 15th, 1977. The 15th of March, 2077. My hands were shaking badly as I carefully turned the dial. Right to 03, left to 15, right to 77. Then I heard a soft, distinct click, and the heavy metal door slowly swung open. What I discovered inside completely changed absolutely everything I thought I knew about my entire life. The safe was packed completely full. The very first thing I clearly saw was money. More cash than I had ever once seen in one single place. High stacks of $100 bills. My hands noticeably trembled as I carefully pulled them out, counting the total amount as I went along. There was $847,000 to be exact. Hidden beneath the stacks of money were various official documents, including multiple driver's licenses, all featuring my mother's photograph, but listing completely different names. Isabella Reyes from New Mexico, Maria Santos from Arizona, Catherine Walsh from Nevada. My mother, Martha Wells, had apparently been living under multiple different identities for numerous decades. At the very bottom of the safe was one sealed envelope with my name distinctly written on it. I sat down hard on the cold basement floor and quickly ripped open the envelope. Inside were 3 pages entirely covered in my mother's handwriting, and the very first sentence made my blood freeze instantly in my veins. My dearest Ethan, if you are reading this letter, it means they finally located you, and I am no longer here alive to protect you. The letter proceeded to completely destroy everything I had ever believed about my life. Your real birth name is Ethan Romero. Your father did not pass away in a car accident when you were 12. His name was Victor Romero, and he was murdered by the Salieri Organization in Chicago on September 18th, 1989. I personally saw his murder because I was supposed to die right alongside him. Instead, I successfully ran away. I took you and I ran away. And 3 months later, I gave official testimony against the man who killed your father in front of a federal grand jury. I had to stop reading for a brief moment. Victor Romero, who was murdered by the mob. And my mother hadn't just been a regular widow. She had been a key witness in a major federal case. The letter continued. We entered the official witness protection program in January 1990. I legally became Martha Wells, you legally became Ethan Wells, and we relocated to Kenton, Indiana. to fully start our lives over. The government provided us with new identities, a modest financial payment, and the solemn promise that we would remain safe. Everything I had wondered about suddenly started making perfect sense. The clear way my mother always seemed to possess just enough money despite her small librarian salary, her strong reluctance to ever discuss our life before moving to Indiana, the way she had tirelessly taught me never to immediately trust strangers. She had been actively keeping us alive. The money currently in the safe is what remains of our government financial payment. But Ethan, there's something else vital you need to know. Something I discovered far too late to properly warn you about. My heart was pounding so intensely I could literally hear it clearly in my ears. I hired private investigators to watch over you in California starting 3 years ago. What they discovered completely broke my heart. Your wife, Serena, has been secretly working with the same people who have been looking for us for decades. They found you first, and they skillfully used her to get dangerously close to you. The room started slowly spinning around me. Serena, the mother of my children, had been cooperating with the same deadly people who had murdered my father. I do not know if she fully understood what she was genuinely involved in or if they simply manipulated her. But the entire divorce proceedings, the false evidence about the gambling, all of it was carefully designed to totally break you financially and emotionally. So you would have absolutely nowhere else to go except back here to Canton. They wanted to force you to return here to the one single place where they knew I might have left something that could potentially lead them to other key witnesses or evidence from the original case. I felt like I was going to throw up immediately. Every terrible thing that had happened to me over the past terrible year, all of it had been carefully planned and set into motion by vicious people who had been relentlessly hunting my family for over 30 years. But my mother hadn't just left me money and the terrible truth. She had clearly left me a powerful way to fight back decisively. There is a contact phone number written at the very bottom of this letter. Call Agent Daniel Cross with the U.S. Marshal Service. He has been patiently waiting for this call since the day I died. Tell him you are Victor Romero's son and tell him you are completely ready to finish what we bravely started. The phone number was written clearly in red ink. Below it, my mother had written one final, loving message. I am sorry I could not reveal the truth to you while I was still alive. I desperately wanted to give you a normal, happy life. But I always knew deep down this terrible day might eventually come. You are much stronger than you know, Ethan. Your father will be immensely proud of the wonderful man you have become. I know I certainly am. Use the money wisely. Get your children back home safely. And always remember that sometimes the absolute worst thing that unexpectedly happens to you leads you exactly to the place where you truly need to be. I sat frozen on that basement floor for an entire hour, just staring blankly at the letter. My entire life had been a massive lie, but the kind of powerful lie that completely protects you until you are finally strong enough to successfully handle the truth. Then I slowly picked up my cell phone and dialed Marshal Agent Daniel Cross's number. Agent Daniel Cross answered on the second ring, sounding exactly like he had been sitting right by his phone. Vance, Marshal Vance. This is Ethan Wells, but I strongly suspect my real name is Ethan Romero. There was a long pause, followed by a deep, audible breath. Son, I have been waiting for this exact call since your mother passed away. Where exactly are you right now? I am currently in my mother's house in Canton, sitting right next to an open safe that she intentionally left for me. Do not touch anything else in that safe. Do not speak to anyone about this. And do not leave that house under any circumstances. I will be physically there in 4 hours. Agent Daniel Cross turned out to be a tall, gray-haired man in his early 60 seconds who looked exactly like he had seen every kind of human evil imaginable. He arrived with 2 other federal agents and spent 6 intense hours carefully checking everything my mother had deliberately left behind. Your mother was certainly one of the bravest people I ever had the privilege of working closely with. He openly told me as we sat late at night at her kitchen table. She was absolutely certain they would eventually manage to track down her son, so she patiently prepared for this difficult day. She wanted you to find all of this critical information exactly when you needed it the most. The full, devastating truth was even worse than I had initially imagined. The Salieri Organization had been systematically hunting down witnesses from my father's murder trial for decades. They had learned how to destroy lives in a much quieter manner. They would find clever ways to hurt the people closest to their targets, then skillfully use those manipulated people to create utter chaos and financial ruin. They have been actively working on your particular case for at least 5 solid years, Agent Daniel Cross clearly explained. They located Serena through her professional real estate connections. They likely approached her initially as potential clients. Legitimate business that slowly transformed into something much more damaging. The investigators my mother had wisely hired had been diligently building their own strong case during this entire period, documenting absolutely everything. They had clear recordings of Serena meeting with known people connected to the Salieri Organization. They possessed concrete evidence of money continuously changing hands, fake papers being created, and witnesses being paid off to lie aggressively about me. The ridiculous gambling addiction story, the fake bank statements, all of it was strictly their calculated work. Agent Daniel Cross said they had successfully used the exact same detailed plan on 6 other witnesses over the past 15 years. But there was one crucial element the Salieri Organization had absolutely not counted on. My mother's death due to natural causes 2 years ago had automatically activated certain security rules within the U.S. Marshal Service. They have been quietly monitoring the situation. We have maintained surveillance on this neighborhood for the last 2 years, Agent Daniel Cross admitted. We knew that if they ever forced you to return here, they would eventually make their decisive move. We have been actively documenting everyone who has shown unusual interest in this specific address. The most shocking revelation occurred the very next morning. Serena had been arrested at her Portland hotel at 6 a.m., along with 3 men who had been continuously following her. She had been unknowingly working with people she mistakenly thought were simply private investigators helping her secure a better divorce settlement. She had absolutely no idea they were directly connected to organized crime, until the federal agents explained the situation to her in an interview room. She has readily agreed to testify against them. Agent Daniel Cross informed me over a cup of coffee. It turns out she is as much of an unwitting victim in this entire scheme as you are. They successfully convinced her you were hiding massive gambling debts and other women. They showed her fake evidence, made her terrified and angry, then offered their help to protect the kids and secure her financial future. The most difficult phone call I have ever made was to Aiden and Lily. They were currently staying with Serena's sister in Portland, both confused and scared. Dad. Aiden's voice sounded small and very young. Hey buddy, I know this is all incredibly confusing and strange right now, but I need you both to clearly understand that everything is going to be alright soon. Are you truly a gambling addict? Lily asked quietly when she got on the phone. Mom said you stole money, and that's why we had to quickly move. No, sweetheart, I never gambled, and I never stole anything from anyone. Some very bad people lied aggressively about me to seriously hurt our family, but the police have successfully caught them all. We are going to be back together again very soon. It required 6 long months to legally fix everything. The strong evidence my mother's investigators had gathered, combined with Serena's testimony and the federal government's case against the Salieri Organization, was ultimately enough to completely clear my name. My insurance license was fully reinstated with an official apology. Serena and I will never successfully get back the close relationship we once had. Too much damage was done, but we are actively working together now to help our children fully understand what actually happened and why the events occurred. She is currently undergoing therapy. I am also in therapy, carefully learning how to trust other people again. But we successfully got our children back, and ultimately, that is what truly matters most of all. The house in Canton successfully sold for enough money to buy a smaller place in California and fully fund college accounts for both children. Aiden's back on the basketball team. Lily's art has become more hopeful and less dark lately. I reflect on my mother every single day, think about the huge sacrifice she willingly made to provide me with a normal, stable childhood. She successfully saved my life twice. Once when I was 12 and again when I was 49, and I never once got the chance to personally thank her. The Salieri case is officially going to trial next year, and I will be formally testifying exactly like my mother bravely did all those years ago. This time, however, I will not be running away afterward. This time, we're going to finish what she courageously started. Sometimes the absolute worst thing that happens unexpectedly to you ultimately leads you exactly to the place where you truly need to be. My mother clearly knew that truth. If this emotional story deeply touched you in any way, please share it with someone who might genuinely need to hear it. Leave a comment below. And if you want to hear many more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary, difficult circumstances, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Thank you for listening carefully. And always remember that sometimes the wonderful people who love us most dearly are the very ones fighting dangerous battles we never even see.